Hi everyone, my name is Anna Zharkova. I'm lead mobile developer in used tech software company Russia. And today I would like to talk about a working background with WorkManager API. So let's go on. A little bit about myself. I'm Kotlin GDE and I'm a woman TechMaker ambassador since this year. So I do a lot of different stuff, and I'm both a native and cross-platform developer, and both iOS and Android. Yes, it's really hard and took and takes a lot of time. So now let's talk about what we will discuss today. Today we will speak about background work in Android, Foreground Services, pro, contrast, and restrictions. Yes, the main topic of my talk is WorkManager API, but there is no background working in Android without Foreground Services. And of course, we will talk about WorkManager API and what's new in Android 12 and background services and how to deal with it. So let's begin. Why do we need background working at all? We are when we use mobile software and when we use smartphones, we also use a lot of different stuff and different applications. So sometimes when we have used one application, we switch to another one, and so we have a lot of different applications opened in our device, and we switch between them. So there is multitasking. And when we switch from one application to another, um, next one applications become active and become in foreground, and the last application we used goes to background state. So, and it works just like this. So at first, application is in running active state, then it becomes inactive when we become switching, and then there could be several background working, and when there is no background working, it will be suspended at all and not running. Yes, it will be kept in our memory, but it will be not active at all. How we switch to this state and why? We have not so much resources in our device. There is a limitations of our memory in our device, so to keep it alive and to allow us to use different applications, different software, um, make different actions, we need to keep um, this balance of performance and memory safety and power safety. So when there is no active applications and when there is no activities in our current application, or there is no foreground services or services that we have launched when application was in foreground, our application goes in background and then suspended. So sometimes we need to use some code in background state. What for? There could be several kind of tasks. For example, to save something, or maybe to finish some action, or maybe to start some action that will be going in some inactive state, for example, to clear something, or to save something, to back up something, or to request something. So here is several kinds of tasks we can use in background state. For example, it could be some kind of immediate tasks, some kind of task that we need to start in exact time, some kind of job that should be expedited, and some kind of stuff that could be deferred. Um, to to be in paradigm of save of energy, most of our stuff should be deferred in launch, And exactly we should the most of our work do in foreground, but there could be several situations when we need to keep the functionality of our application even in a background state. So for all this kind of task, we can use different mechanisms. For example, for immediate task, we can use both Work Manager and Foreground Service. For exact start or launch of different tasks, we can use Alarm Manager. Everyone knew Alarm Manager. Everyone know it. It's just like alarm or clock, and everyone use it. Also, there could be expedited work. It's new kind of job that was presented in Android 12. And for deferred tasks, we can use, of course, Work Manager. So it is the main purpose for what this stuff was designed. So um, let's take a look to several sample tasks. For example, we need to design sample application that should read some data. For example, sensors. And this application should do this both in background and foreground. There is no problem to do this in foreground, but in background state. Well, there could be several restrictions for several permissions, but let's take a look not in permissions but in the several mechanisms. So to begin with, we will do this with foreground services. Foreground services, it's a special kind of services that was designed to start our work immediately and to keep it with launching several kind of notifications and to switching from this notification to our active state of application. And foreground services was the main mechanism that allowed us to use all the services in background state. Long ago, when everyone was young and I was a junior developer, we could use just simple services or intent services to do several kind of job. We used a lot of different alarms and broadcast receivers, and everything worked fine. But we're living in 2021, and situation even another. So uh, kind of the main idea is uh, to be in with security and keeping our energy and safety. The safety is main idea. That is why there are several restrictions. But let's take a look. How can we deal with all these restrictions today? For example, to begin with simple foreground services, we just implement a service that has simple on-start command, and when it started, it used not only start services but start service foreground with several stuff on it. For example, we create special kind of notification. We could use here several kind of actions to begin with, and also we use command start foreground. We use several ID and use notifications we specified. And of course, we specify pending intent to switch to several activity. So there is no broadcast receivers. We use pending intent to switch without trampoline. It's just like normal behavior of our service. And you can see that I use here several actions to support. It is intent filter action screen on and action screen off. Why do I need this? I need to support switching from background to foreground and back when the screen is gone off and on. So I need to support it. So here is my foreground services. But and here is my broadcast receiver. This is receiver not to start my services, but to register and to receive the event when my screen will go off and on. So it will help me to keep several kind of stuff alive. So why do I need all these actions? And of course, here is a waker. This waker will keep my device alive. And it will help me to prevent the killing of my applications. Yes, there is several and different kind of platform versions and Android SDK we can use in different vendors, and different kind of firmware support different mechanism. But in most of we will face that our foreground source will be killed in several times, and there is not behavior we will face we would like to face in our work. So also we need to specify several actions in on task removed and on destroy of our service to restart of our service. Yes, it will help us to make our work longer. Um, when our service is killed by a system, we need to restart it and to recreate it. Yes, it's there is nothing strange in this. But on task removed means when the users tried to kill the service by swapping it. So we also don't need such behavior. We need to keep our service alive. And one more, we need alarm manager. What for? I have a sample where I need scheduling of sensors reading. And to work correctly, I need to use alarm. And of course, there is several problems with firmware of different vendors. When there is different versions of behavior of keeping my memory safe uh, and to support dose mode. We all know what is dose mode, and sometimes it could be harmful for our applications and for the behavior. And sometimes our users definitely don't know how to deal with it, but they suppose that our applications will work correctly. So in such kind of situations, we need to provide alarm manager to deal with several kind of stuffs. For example, to recreate or restart our service. Yes, it's really tricky. It's not beautiful solutions, but it works. And last year, I struggled a lot with different firmware versions. I used classic Android from several vendors, and in fact, in Russia, there is not too much versions of firmware that are not customized too much. There is a lot of customized firmware, and all of these customized firmware have a lot of different restrictions and different actions, and they support different permissions. So this work with foreground service and keeping it alive turns your life in hell. Absolutely. So it was horrible. So, in such way, we will receive several actions and several events and recreate our service first. Next one moment. Yes, it looks too much complicated, and it was too much complicated because all these services could be killed or stopped by systems, definitely. So, and there was a lot of restrictions from many vendors and from customers. And um, to shoot on your leg, you can use several different solutions. And why foreground services is not a really good solution at all nowadays? Now, there is more restrictions from this new version of Android. Um, If you looked at my code with attention, you noticed that I launched foreground services from background. Yes, uh, even when my service was launched from foreground, it could be killed by system because of memory safety, even when I disabled dose mode. and all the permissions was given. So from the version of Android 12, all the foreground services from background launched from background is forbidden. Yes, there is several cases when it is allowed to use foreground services launched from background. For example, when we start an activity that wasn't in a stack. So in my case, I have an activity. It was a single activity, and notification from foreground services launched this activity. It was already in stack, but if I would like to start new activity, it will be okay. Of course, it will be okay with Firebase Cloud Messaging. I think that it is one of the main mechanisms that save lives of many developers all over the world. Exact alarm. Yes, I used exact alarm in my work. Also, it will be actions when the boot is completed or device was locked, and or maybe the package was replaced. And time locale changed also is allowed cases to restart our foreground service, or maybe when we have reconnected Bluetooth or scanning for Bluetooth devices and using your company device manager for this purpose. And also when we turn off battery optimization for your app. But it is just like tricky condition, because even when you could turn off all battery optimization in your application, foreground services could be killed or stopped, and there could be several problems with launching it from background. So here is another API, and it is WorkManager, and it is recommended. Yes, though the half of my talk was about why do we need background working and how to deal with the foreground services, now we will talk about WorkManager as recommended API. But I think that without foreground services and struggling with it, there could be no talk about WorkManager at all. So, how it works? Um, Under its hood, it uses a different kind of mechanism that uses job scheduler, job dispatcher, both with different kind of executors, alarm managers. And at first, we create special work request. And with special work manager, we processes and to put it in queue with several conditions. And then when we face this condition, when the condition is true, the request is launched. So it is a mechanism to deal with background working with several conditions and several time scheduling. Basically, we create special kind of worker, and it will and our class that was previously a service should extend this worker with several parameters. And in main method do work, we do several start. Well, my code in my screen is just little wrong in several places. In do work method, I need to call a restart sensor method for my case, for example. And when our worker is ready, we will create special kind of request. And then with special work manager, we will enqueue this work request, and in special time, our request will be launched. There is two kinds of requests in Work Manager. First one is one time. It is for the job that should be launched in special time only one time. It's just like intense service when we needed to start several special kind of work, and when all the job was done, our service was shut down. So it is the same situation. So at first it is enqueued, then it's running, then it is failed or succeeded or cancelled. Depends on what was this work of this request successful, or have we cancelled this request. And also we could specify some special restrictions for this request. For example, we can specify some kind of restriction that could successfully deal with those mode, and it's pretty cool because it will help our manager and our job to keep alive even we have several restrictions from the dose mode or energy mode in our device. We know that we never know what do with the device our customers. And one thing that is interesting, we can chain all the requests in WorkManager. For example, we can chain them as parallel uh, while defining them as a list of these requests, or maybe we can specify them as a sequence using then command and chaining one after another. And also we can specify several conditions to check the situations, what was happened with our requests, or maybe to define several adapters that will help us with all this work. Um, so, in the main case I previously talked, I needed to implement an application that need to read sensors in some kind of loop. So while my application works, it reads sensors and write it somewhere, save it somewhere, or maybe show it somewhere if I'm in foreground. So when the request was finished, I needed to start next request. Yes, it's definitely. But in such kind of manager, I need to specify all the requests before chaining. And there is a deal how what I need to do with dynamic chaining of the requests, how I could do this. And this is a problem. So Work Manager have a mechanism of periodic requests. And it seems that is a scheduling, and that is a kind of scheduling I need in my work. But it's not, because the minimal repeat interval is about 15 minutes. 15 minutes is okay to for such kind of job as clear something, save something, or maybe request some kind of update. But it's not okay in such kind of application. Um, for example, when I need to read the sensors every minute or every 30 seconds, or maybe I have a settings where my customer can define in what time he needs to perform such action. Yes, it's a problem. So also, periodic requests doesn't begin if the several constraints met, and it could be chained. Yes, in some cases it could be a problem. And what is the main problem with all back for work manager and all these kinds of requests? Uh, it's not guaranteed that my requests will be launched immediately. Yes, and the intervals between two periodics differs because of this. Why it happened? It happened because system choose in what correct time it is better to launch this work when all the conditions are met, when there is no restrictions, and when there is enough resources to start all these requests. Yes, it's really good for energy safety for performance, but it's not good for my application because my application works not in what because it's not behavior I would like to face in my with the work of my applications. So there is wrong behavior, and there is a sample schema of periodic requests. Well, at first it's enqueued, it's running, or maybe it's tried to running, and when it is okay, it's it's one more time enqueued and one more time running. So it's running until it's failed or cancelled. So there is a simple detail about this request. Well, time start could be deferred and I have the many chain problems, but I need to chain all these requests in one. What should I do in this case and how can we deal with this problem? There is several workarounds. At first, we can use Alarm Manager. Yes, Work Manager has its own mechanism to define the time to start, but it is not exact time. To start in exact time, we need Alarm Manager that will work as set and allow by idle or set exact and allow by idle. With all these commands, we can define how and when we should start and launch our one-time requests. Or one more trick, we can loop one-time work requests. And for this, we can use several tags for our requests. And also we can use several mechanism of Work Manager. For example, it allows us to add some new requests in chain or in queue with several modes. For example, when we use keep mode, it means when we add new requests in our queue. Another one will not be replaced or maybe they will not be repeated. We can also use append, but it's a risk that it will be working in parallel. So it is a risk. What's next? Um, and also we can use several new mechanisms in Work Manager API. At first, um, let's talk how can we deal with deferred requests and how can we um, prevent it and to allow to um, launch our requests immediately. So for this purpose, we have mechanism, and yes, this mechanism was available for us before Android 12. For example, in Work Manager API version 2.3, we have an opportunity to start immediately our requests by using listenable worker set foreground async or curtain worker set foreground. This is a kind of workers, and the second one allows us to use coroutines under its hood. So when we worked with all these requests, we created special kind of foreground info, and then we launched it as not as a job but as a special foreground services. So this mechanism allows us to turn our job in special kind of foreground services. It's special kind of foreground job. But there is a problem that in new version Android 12, because of all the limitations of security and safety, this mechanism is deprecated. And when you try to launch such kind of code in Android 12, you will receive foreground services start not allowed exception. When this application will be launched in previous version, there will be no kind of problem, but with Android 12 you will face it. So, and once more, there is about cases where foreground services are allowed. We knew this, and this is especially actual in this version. So, how can we deal with foreground services and with the job, with Work Manager, and with immediate state? Uh, in the Android 12, new mechanism was presented. It is Expedited Jobs. So it allows to run job as soon as possible. Yes, it could be deferred, but not too much. It is less restricted during those bad and beta receiver, and so it could not be so so successful with several restrictions because some of them is working under its hood, some is ignored, and that is why it's less likely to be killed than regular jobs. And it seems and it sounds really good, but there is two details. For example, there is a quotas for such kind of jobs, and when the quotas is over, your job will be dropped or will be turned into ordinary job. And every job has about 1 or 3 minutes to finish all this stuff. So you can use this job to relaunch something, or maybe save something, or maybe send something. So for short kind of job. Um, so all the restrictions for those mode and for about charging, about device states are not supported in it. But we can specify other restrictions, and also uh, how to deal with quotas. We can specify special politics policy, and in this special policy we have two options. First is to drop work request. So for example, if you don't want uh, to continue your job, you can specify drop work request and it will be stopped when the quota is out of, and or it could be submitted as an ordinary job when you specify run as non-expedited work request. So you should choose what is correct for you. So, and there is only one command to specify how to start it as expedited job, and then you can turn your request in special kind of job. Well, and migration from foreground services to expedited job could be really easy. For example, so there is once more again, it's a sample of our foreground service, and now we turn it to curtain service. We just specify several actions, we redefine do work and make it suspended, and also in previous version of Android, we specify set foreground with create a special foreground info. For our application, specifying pending intent, notifications. So we just turn our job or our worker in foreground. And this how we turn our current job, current worker without any foreground service to expedited job. Just specify one command in manager, remove all the stuff about foreground service and start our request. And then you can also specify the rules for looping, to repeating, restarted, and what you need in your task. So what should I say in summary? Uh, WorkManager is recommended API, but it has a lot of limitation and you can struggle with background mode. Um, I worked with background mode in iOS, so both iOS and Android. So it's really a hard topic, and you will also struggle. So it's just a way of developer. It's just a law of your life. You should know this. You should know this that you will struggle anyway. Um, we still have to use alarm managers when we need to specify exact time, and it is set in documentation, official documentation, in actual official documentation. So the problem of periodic requests need to use tricky solutions and just not to use foreground services in new version of Android. So there is several kinds of sources. Hope it was interesting and useful for you. Thanks for listening. And I'm ready to your questions. Well, I think that I could read it by myself. The first question is, how would you suggest running schedule works in those mode? Well, I think there is a kind of settings. that you need to specify in your request and when you will specify it, and this information was in slide. It will be okay. For those mode, you can, if you don't need to use exact start of your request, you just can specify 15 minutes as a minimal interval, or maybe try to use 1 hour, or maybe 24 hours if you need to specify it in such interval. And you know that it's more kindly and more punctual to use scheduling of workers in not every 15 minutes, but every day, or maybe once a week. Um, should we use Work Manager for analytic event tracking to avoid doing too much work in the UI? I don't think so. You know that we need to use analytic and event tracking in case we specify exact event. So, for example, you have sent your request, and in this case, you need to specify it. And of course, if you have a risk that your application could go background, in this case, you can specify it as expedited work, and it will not be interrupted when you will get in background. But in this case, you should better to stop all working in background. It's more convenient solution, I think so. Um, is it a good practice to show work progress through system alert dialog? Well, why not? If you need it, do this. It's not connected with the Work Manager at all. Um, should we work question is answered. Google is coming up with its own caller identification system. What does it use WorkManager? I think so, yes. All the stuff Google implemented by themselves, all the stuff use all the mechanism Google implemented, but it could be also special settings and special exceptions for their own stuff that will allow some of these to work in the way they need it. Or maybe they could test it in its own software and then to specify all this mechanism to be available for other developers, or maybe to let it to be private. Can we use Work Manager for location tracking continuously? Yes, it's really a good question. There is another problem with location tracking because location tracking is not allowed in background mode in Android 12. So you need to deal with all the permissions, and you can also specify some kind of permissions. For example, there is permissions for camera, for microphone, also for location tracking, but you can face that continuously tracking could be not allowed behavior, and when your application will be reviewed in the market, you can face problems with the reviewer. Can we use Work Manager for playing music in the background just like Spotify does? I think so, but for this mechanism, we need to stay with Foreground Services. Why? We start listening music when we are in foreground stage. So foreground and bind services is a particularly classic solution for playing music in background, and I don't think that we need to change it in something else. The problem with foreground services is just to start them from background, and when you start foreground services from foreground, you just can face one problem, that when there is no event that will keep your system keep your application, not system, alive, your service will be killed. But listening audio is one of the cases when foreground service will keep alive. It's absolutely good. And no work manager, it's not for this purpose. Work manager is just like for some kind of short or scheduled short work. Um, how can we continue running foreground services with old device? Some device stop foreground service without on destroy. Well, it depends on your settings of your device. And also, you need to specify recreating your service when it faces on destroy method or maybe on task removed. Yes, it's really hard moment to find a correct point to recreate your event, your service. And in this case, you need to use some kind of receivers to keep such kind of event and to recreate your service. Well, one more question I see here. Well. If we set target version below Android 12, do Android 12 allow foreground services to work as it does in Android 11? So, as it's said in documentation in Google's developer site, you can use foreground services at all. The problem with using foreground services in Android 12 is launching in background, and there is no such kind of restrictions in Android 12, in Android 11, for example. But it could be killed by your system depending on different kind of settings of your DOS mode. So it's allowed to use foreground services on Android 11, and moreover, you can also use Work Manager set foreground without any restrictions. Even running to these fatal exceptions is running. Um, well, no, unfortunately, I haven't faced such kind, but depending on your track, you, for example, maybe, well, maybe it depends on some kind of your constraints, or maybe you have your work is stopped and you're trying to launch it one more again. Maybe it connect with this. So what is uh, let's say we have a Truecaller like an app where it has to keep listening for phone calls. One way is to start a foreground services from a broadcast receiver, where the service will be drawing the caller ID on the screen. What's the alternate on Android 12? Well, I think so that for Android 12, so for example, let's think about it. You have broadcast receiver, and in this case, you when you're receive a call, your system is awaking, so you can start some kind of job or maybe some kind of service, and there is no matter because um, and this and when your system is awaking, you can just try to from your broadcast receiver to start something, for example, even to use some kind of notifications or just put your activity in foreground when you get it. Well, 8 years ago, it was one of the most widespread task for junior developers to create such kind of caller. Oh, we are eating a time of next speaker. Thanks everyone for questions.
Oh, and no, pardon me, Anna. I didn't stop you because I think you were doing an
Oh,
excellent job, and the questions are great. So thank you so much for an excellent presentation and for answering all those questions thoroughly. The remaining questions, if you guys want to carry the conversation on to the speaker table in AirMeet, it's like the top left table, then you guys can, Anna, if you want to sit there, let's start. I'll have to verify this with Sayed, but I think let's start Sayed's talk, which is the next talk, about 5 minutes late. So everybody will have about 10 minutes to take a break, chat with Anna if you want. And then, yeah, we'll see you at the next talk. Thank you so much, Anna.
thank
And
you.
Yeah. All
I
right.
will send my Twitter and everyone can connect me in Twitter. Unfortunately, well, I have a working day, so it was my pause. And now I'm going to work again, so you can write me on Twitter and I will answer your questions. And you can follow me. Thank you very much, Alan.
Pleasure. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.